I was 16 when I realized I was never really a daughter in my parents' eyes, just unpaid help with their last name. Every morning started the same way. 5:30 a.m. Alarm screaming in the dark, the chill of the kitchen floor under my bare feet. My mother, Vivian, liked the house spotless before sunrise, just in case someone important drops by. No one ever did. But that didn't matter. It was my job to polish the marble counters, brew Dad's black coffee, press his suits, and pack lunches for a family that pretended I didn't exist. They called it helping. I called it servitude. By the time I turned 20, I was still there, scrubbing, cooking, ironing, while my brother Nathan and sister Serena chased their dreams across Ivy League campuses. I'd been accepted to college too, but my father said, "We can't afford tuition for a hobby. You're better off learning how to run a household." A hobby. That's what he called my dream of running an event company, organizing weddings, galas, and corporate launches that people would talk about for years. A hobby, the irony? My hobby had already helped them. I'd single-handedly planned my father's company holiday party at 19, coordinating a 200-person event on a shoestring budget. It was a roaring success. Executives praised him for having such a talented staff. He didn't correct them. He didn't even mention my name. That night, I overheard Serena laughing with friends in the living room. "Harper's basically the maid," she said, and everyone burst out laughing. Harper, me, the family joke. I wish I could say I stormed out right then. But the truth is, guilt is a powerful leash. Every time I tried to leave, Mom would clutch her pearls and say, "After everything we've done for you?" So I stayed, for 5 more years. But everything changed on a rain-soaked Thursday. I was 25, elbow deep in dishwater, when Dad stormed in waving a letter. "Explain this," he barked, tossing the envelope onto the counter. It was an offer letter, one I'd kept hidden in my dresser. A small event startup in New York had offered me a junior planner position. Nothing glamorous, but a real step toward the career I'd dreamed of. "You're turning this down," Dad said flatly. "No," I said, voice trembling but firm. "I'm taking it." The silence that followed was suffocating. "You're ungrateful," Mom hissed. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? Abandoning your family to chase some fantasy?" I wanted to scream that they hadn't given me anything, but I didn't. I just packed my bags that night and left without saying goodbye. New York was terrifying. My apartment was a shoebox with peeling paint, and my paycheck barely covered rent. But for the first time in my life, the air tasted like freedom. And little by little, that freedom grew into something bigger. The company, Nova Occasions, was tiny, but they valued me. My ideas mattered. My work mattered. Within a year, I'd gone from intern to lead planner. Within 3, I was managing million-dollar corporate events. And at 29, I took the biggest leap of my life. I started my own firm. Hale and Hartman Events was born out of sleepless nights and stubborn dreams. At first, no one believed a 2-woman team could compete with established agencies. But we hustled. We pitched relentlessly. We outworked everyone. And slowly, the calls started coming in. The first major contract, a $600,000 tech product launch, changed everything. The second, a luxury fashion brand's global rebranding gala, made industry headlines. By year 5, we were known as the agency that never missed, never stumbled, never failed. And that's when they came back. It started with a phone call I didn't answer, then an email I deleted, then a letter addressed to our dearest Harper, from the same parents who'd once called me a maid. They wanted to reconnect. They wanted to catch up. Most importantly, they wanted to discuss potential collaborations. I ignored them, until one afternoon, my assistant buzzed into my office. "Harper, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says he's your father." I should have sent him away, but curiosity won. And when I stepped into the lobby, there he was. Older, grayer, still wearing the same condescending expression. "You look different," he said, as if surprised I'd managed to survive without polishing his shoes. "I am different," I replied. He cleared his throat. "We're in talks with a hospitality group. They're planning a nationwide expansion. They need an events partner." I thought, maybe your company could handle it. I almost laughed. The same man who'd called my dream a hobby was now here, hat in hand, asking me to save his reputation. "I'll think about it," I said coolly, "but I don't do family discounts." 2 months later, that hospitality group turned out to be Horizon Resorts, one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the country. And they weren't just considering Hale and Hartman. We were the frontrunner for a $4 million nationwide contract. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. But it wasn't, because my parents weren't done. Whispers started spreading. Hale and Hartman is unstable. Their leadership is inexperienced. Their finances are questionable. Vendors backed out of meetings. Clients grew distant. And when I traced the rumors back to their source, I wasn't surprised. Every single one led straight to my family. They were trying to destroy me again. But this time I wasn't the girl scrubbing kitchen floors. This time, I was ready for a fight. As the final pitch meeting with Horizon approached, I gathered my team. "We're not just presenting a business proposal tomorrow," I told them. "We're proving that integrity beats manipulation, every single time." And deep down, I knew something else too. If I could win this contract, if I could stand in that boardroom and show the world what I'd built, then I'd never have to prove myself to anyone again. Not even them. 3 days before the Horizon board meeting, my office turned into a war room. Spreadsheets, financial reports, vendor contracts. Every inch of the conference table was buried beneath evidence of 5 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. My team, my chosen family, worked with a precision that left no room for doubt. "Testimonials from every major client are ready," said Lila, my COO and the woman who'd believed in me since day one. "I've organized them chronologically. Fortune 500 companies, celebrity clients, international nonprofits. No one can question our credibility." "Good," I replied, scanning the timeline. "What about financial audits?" "They're rock solid," said Miles, our CFO, sliding a leather folder across the table. His voice was calm, but I could see the storm in his eyes. 15 years of spotless books. No missed payments. 0 regulatory issues. Growth of 22% year over year. "Then why does this still feel like a trap?" I muttered. Lila met my eyes. "Because it is." She was right. The sabotage hadn't stopped. It had escalated. 2 days ago, one of our vendors forwarded me an email from someone pretending to be an independent auditor. The language was slick and professional, but the email address was my father's. Yesterday, a potential client pulled out of a $300,000 contract, citing concerning rumors about our company's solvency. I later discovered the rumor came from a golf club conversation between my mother and the client's board chair. And that morning, a journalist from the Wall Street Ledger called to fact-check an anonymous tip alleging Hale and Hartman was under investigation for fraudulent accounting. I laughed when I hung up, not because it was funny, but because it was so transparent. "They're scared," Miles said. "They know if we land Horizon, we'll be untouchable." "Then let's give them something to be scared of," I replied. That night, the rain hammered against my office windows as the city pulsed below. I stayed late, reviewing every line of our presentation and every possible angle of attack. By midnight, I wasn't just preparing for a meeting. I was preparing for war. At 2 a.m., Lila found me still at my desk. "You should sleep," she said gently. "I will. After this is done," she sighed, pulling up a chair beside me. "You know they're going to try something inside that boardroom." I nodded. "Let them." I stared at the city lights, my reflection faint in the glass. Older now, harder. The girl who once begged for scraps of approval was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd built something from nothing and refused to let anyone take it from her. "They underestimated me once," I said quietly. "They won't make that mistake again." The next morning, a message from Horizon's CEO landed in my inbox. "Emergency board meeting, 8:00 a.m. sharp. We've received troubling information about your company. You'll need to address these concerns before we proceed." I read it twice, then 3 times. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I'd been expecting this. "They've made their move," I said when Lila walked into my office. She paled. "Already?" I nodded. "They're going straight to the board. probably with doctored reports, fake complaints, half-truths, the usual. Then we go straight to the truth, Miles said firmly. We present the real numbers, the real history, and we expose every lie they've planted. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. This is it. This is the moment everything we've built either stands or falls. The night before the meeting, none of us went home. We triple-checked every document, every slide, every fact. Lila prepared a detailed timeline of every sabotage attempt, from anonymous health inspections to leaked vendor calls. Miles compiled a decade's worth of certified audits. I rehearsed my presentation until I could recite it in my sleep. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from a former vendor. Harper, your mother called us. Said she's helping Horizon with a background check. Told her you were the best company we've ever worked with. Hope that helps. I stared at the message for a long time. Helping Horizon with a background check. The manipulation never ended. But for the first time in my life, it didn't scare me. It fueled me. Everything's ready, Miles said at dawn. We're prepared for any question they throw at us. I looked around at the people who had become my family. Lila, who'd stayed when the company had no clients. Miles, who'd mortgaged his house to help us make payroll in our second year. These were the people who had believed in me when my own blood had not. We're not just fighting for a contract tomorrow, I said, my voice low and steady. We're fighting for every moment they tried to make us feel small, for every door they slammed in our faces, for every time they called us a hobby. Lila's eyes shone with quiet determination. Then let's burn the whole narrative down. On the morning of the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror in my office, adjusting the collar of my charcoal gray blazer. It was the same blazer I'd worn at my first job interview in New York, a reminder of how far I'd come. You ready? Lila asked from the doorway. As I'll ever be. We rode the elevator down in silence, the weight of the day pressing heavy on my chest. But beneath it was something new. Not fear, not anxiety, but resolve. When the doors opened into Horizon's glass-walled headquarters, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Cameras flashed. Assistants whispered. Somewhere in the building, my family was waiting. Smug, confident, certain that this was the day they'd finally break me. But they were about to learn something they should have known all along. I don't break. The boardroom was larger than I expected. All marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a table big enough to seat 20. The executives were already there, expressions unreadable. And at the far end, sitting together like royalty, were the people I'd once called family. My mother's smile was polished and poisonous. My father wouldn't look at me. Serena tapped at her phone, bored. And next to them stood Victoria Kent, a PR shark with a grudge against my company. Miss Harper Hale, the CEO, greeted me with a practiced smile. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Thank you for having me, I said, my voice steady. As I took my seat, Victoria rose and began her presentation, a carefully curated slideshow of half-truths, distortions, and outright lies. She talked about inconsistent leadership and concerning retention rates. She painted my company as a risk, and my mother? She leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. We only want what's best for everyone involved, she said sweetly. We felt it was our responsibility to raise these issues. The old me would have felt the walls closing in, but not today. Today? I smiled. Mr. Townsend, I said calmly, opening the folder in front of me. Before we continue, I'd like to address these claims with complete transparency. And as I slid a USB drive across the table, containing 15 years of proof, every audit, every success, every sabotage attempt, I felt the tide begin to turn. The storm was here, and I was ready to walk through it. The room fell into an uneasy silence as my USB drive was plugged into the projection system. A few clicks later, 15 years of my company's history illuminated the giant screen. Every audit, every milestone, every proof of success that my family had tried to erase. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, standing slowly. My voice was calm, controlled. But beneath the surface, a lifetime of buried rage was beginning to stir. Before you today is the real story of Hale and Hartman. The numbers. The results. The truth. On the screen, revenue charts soared upward. Client testimonials rolled across the slide. Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrity endorsements, philanthropic organizations, all praising our precision, reliability, and ethics. Over 15 years, I continued, we've managed events for presidents, raised millions for charities, and executed global campaigns without a single breach of contract. Our client retention rate? 89%, 27 points higher than the industry average. Vendor payment record? Flawless. Audit history? Perfect. Victoria shifted uneasily in her chair. The fabricated data she'd just presented was evaporating before everyone's eyes. And yet, I said, clicking to the next slide, despite that, someone has repeatedly attempted to sabotage our reputation. Lila tapped her tablet, and a timeline filled the screen. A chilling, meticulous record of every underhanded move. Anonymous calls to health inspectors days before major events. Leaked financial rumors to potential clients. Emails sent under fake identities questioning our leadership. Vendor calls, warning them we were under investigation. Murmurs rippled across the boardroom. Executives leaned forward, scanning the evidence with growing unease. As COO of Hale & Hartman, Lila said, rising to stand beside me, I've documented every one of these incidents. Each occurred directly before a major contract negotiation, and the Horizon deal has triggered the most aggressive wave yet. My mother's carefully composed smile twitched. Serena's hand froze halfway to her glass of water. This is ridiculous, my mother said, her voice a notch too high. We're merely concerned about Harper's decision-making. Then perhaps, Miles interrupted, clicking to the next slide, you can explain this. An email appeared on the screen, from Serena to Victoria Kent, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject line, Horizon meeting, strategy notes. Body, let's make sure they see her as unstable. Play up the Westbrook cancellation. Dad can handle the board. The color drained from Serena's face. Martin Hayes, Horizon's chief legal counsel, leaned forward. Miss Kent, were you aware of this personal connection when you agreed to present your findings? Victoria swallowed. I was approached as a consultant. Consultant? I echoed. Like the one who sent an inspector to our kitchen the day before the Williams Foundation gala. Another click. A report appeared. Anonymous caller identified themselves as a family member concerned about safety. Or the vendor calls. The accountant leaks, the conveniently timed cancellations. Each piece, documented and verified, appeared on the screen like courtroom evidence. You weren't trying to protect me, I said, locking eyes with my father. You were trying to destroy me. His eyes finally met mine, cold, unapologetic. Your company isn't built to last, Harper. We were trying to save you from inevitable failure. I laughed, a sound sharper and colder than I expected. Save me? By sabotaging contracts? By calling my clients? By planting lies in the press? You were always too emotional to lead, he muttered, his voice low. Too impulsive, too emotional, I repeated, my voice rising with every word. I started this company with nothing but $800, a Craigslist office, and a second-hand laptop. I worked 18-hour days while you mocked me. I built something from the ground up. Without your money, without your help, without your name. The room was dead silent now. Even Victoria stared at the table. And the truth is, I continued, you didn't think I would fail. You were terrified I'd succeed. At that moment, the doors opened. 3 figures entered, unexpected, uninvited, but very welcome. Thomas Richardson, CEO of Richardson Hotels. Elena Vega, COO of Vega Global Entertainment. And Jonathan Price, head of the North American Business Alliance. Apologies for the interruption, Thomas said, striding to the front. We were asked to provide statements. Townsend nodded. Go ahead. I've worked with Hale & Hartman for 6 years, Thomas said. No one in the industry matches their precision and professionalism. They handled our $12 million rebranding launch without a single flaw. Elena stepped forward next. When my team faced a disaster during a charity gala, Harper's company saved the event in under 2 hours. That's not leadership you learn. That's leadership you are. And Jonathan added, Every major event association I know considers Hale and Hartman the gold standard. The fact that we're even having this conversation is absurd. My mother's composure finally shattered. "This is an ambush," she hissed, rising from her seat. "No," Townsend said, his voice cold and cutting. "This is accountability." He turned toward my parents. "What I see is a deliberate, coordinated campaign of interference. Personal vendettas disguised as professional concern. And I want to make one thing very clear. Any further attempts to undermine Horizon's partnerships will result in immediate legal action." He faced Victoria next. "Miss Kent, I suggest you consult legal counsel regarding your participation in this matter." Victoria gathered her papers, face pale, and hurried from the room. Serena followed, too humiliated to speak. My father stared at the table. My mother, for the first time in my life, looked small. "Family reputation," she whispered. "We were only trying to protect the family reputation." I took a breath, steady and sure. For 15 years, I've built something that should have enhanced that reputation. Integrity, excellence, hard work. That's what this company is built on. If that embarrasses you, that's your problem, not mine. Townsend rose, signaling the end of the meeting. "Miss Hale, please step outside while the board deliberates. We'll call you back shortly." The 30 minutes in the hallway felt longer than the 15 years that brought me here. Lila squeezed my hand. Miles offered a rare, reassuring smile. "No matter what happens," Lila whispered, "they'll never touch you again. Not after today." When the doors finally opened, my family was gone. Townsend stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "After reviewing all evidence," he began, "the board has reached a unanimous decision." I held my breath. Horizon Resorts is awarding the contract to Hale and Hartman. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Relief, validation, triumph. 15 years of fighting for recognition, all crystallized into a single, perfect moment. But that's not all, Townsend continued. We'd also like to explore a global partnership. Exclusive event management across all Horizon properties. Estimated value, just under $4 million, Lila gasped. Miles blinked. I just stood there, trying to steady myself as my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Townsend extended his hand. We value partners who demonstrate integrity, resilience, and courage under fire. And today you demonstrated all three. I shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Mr. Townsend. You won't regret this. I know, he said with a small smile. When we stepped back into the hallway, Lila threw her arms around me. Miles clapped me on the back. You did it, Lila whispered. We did it. No, I said, exhaling a breath that had been building for 15 years. We earned it. Outside, the city skyline stretched endlessly before us. I felt taller, lighter, free. The people who once treated me like their maid had just watched me sign a $4 million global contract, and they could never take that away from me again. The next morning, the office felt different. For years, every Monday had started with a battle. Another rumor to kill, another client to reassure, another family trap to disarm. But this morning, it began with champagne corks and confetti. $4 million, Lila said slowly, still sounding as if she needed to say the number out loud to believe it. Do you realize what that means? It means, I said, leaning back in my chair, we're just getting started. The Horizon partnership was everywhere. On the front page of Business Weekly, in glossy spreads across LinkedIn, trending under our event queen on social media. Within hours, we'd received 12 new inquiries from Fortune 500 companies. 2 venture firms called, offering expansion funding, and an industry conference invited me, to deliver the keynote on leadership. I had spent a lifetime being told I was too emotional, too naive, too ambitious. And now? The industry was hanging on my every word. Lila burst into my office holding a tablet. You need to see this. It was an article in the Wall Street Journal. After securing $4 million Horizon deal, Hale and Hartman poised to redefine the luxury event industry. My photo, confident, composed, unapologetic, was splashed across the header. Not the exhausted daughter cleaning dishes in her mother's kitchen. Not the unwanted maid serving invisible meals. This was me, the CEO they tried to erase and couldn't. That afternoon, we hosted an all-hands meeting. The entire team gathered in the glass-walled conference room, the same room where we'd once cried over sabotage and lost contracts. Now it hummed with laughter, excitement, and the smell of celebration cupcakes. "I need to say something," I told them, stepping up to the front. The chatter died down. Dozens of eyes turned to me, the people who had chosen to believe long before the world had. 15 years ago, this company was a dream written on a napkin, I began. We didn't have funding. We didn't have powerful connections. We didn't even have furniture. What we did have was heart, and that's what built Hale and Hartman. Applause echoed through the room, but I wasn't finished. Some people tried to break us, I continued, voice steady. They told us we were nothing. They tried to make us feel like nothing. But every late night, every rejection, every tear, every no, it built this. It built us. I looked out at my team, designers, coordinators, interns, executives, my chosen family. And now, I said, smiling, we're taking this dream global. The room erupted into cheers. It wasn't just a victory. It was vindication for every one of us who'd ever been underestimated. But success, I learned, has a way of drawing ghosts back from the shadows. 3 days after the announcement, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. My heart skipped. Not with fear this time, but curiosity. "Harper." My mother's voice came softly through the line, thinner than I remembered. "We saw the news." I waited. "Congratulations," she said at last. $4 million, that's impressive. "Thank you," I replied, my tone polite but distant. A long silence followed. "We were only ever trying to protect you." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I'd once believed that lie. I'd built my life trying to earn that version of love. "Protect me?" I said quietly. "You tried to ruin me." "But that's okay, because now I don't need protecting." "Harper, please," she said. "The family is struggling. Your father's consulting work," there it was. "The real reason for the call. I wish you well," I said, cutting her off gently. "But I have a company to run." I hung up without anger, without tears. Just a strange, peaceful finality. That chapter of my life was over. I had no more apologies left to give. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Horizon's flagship resort launch in Miami became the most talked about event of the year. The governor attended. 3 billionaires signed partnership deals on the spot. We didn't just meet expectations, we rewrote them. And the press? They couldn't get enough. Harper Hale, the self-made CEO who defied her family. The maid who became a mogul. From kitchen floors to corporate towers. The $4 million story everyone's talking about. It was surreal reading those headlines. For so long, I'd been invisible. Now the world saw me, not as a servant, not as a mistake, but as a leader. One evening, after another 12-hour day of negotiations and calls, I found myself back at the old neighborhood, the place where it all started. The little house with the faded shutters, the cracked driveway, the window I used to stare out of while scrubbing dishes. The porch light was on. Through the window, I saw my parents eating dinner. They didn't see me, and I didn't knock. I smiled, then turned away. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had already built something far greater, my own legacy. Weeks later, at an industry gala in Los Angeles, I was named Entrepreneur of the Year. As I stepped on stage, the crowd rose to its feet. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Cameras flashed, and in that moment, I didn't think of the boardroom battle. I didn't think of the sabotage or the sleepless nights. I thought of that teenage girl in her parents' kitchen, tired, unseen, covered in dishwater, and I wished I could tell her. One day, you'll own the room they said you didn't belong in. After the ceremony, a man approached me. Early 40s, expensive suit, confident smile. "Ms. Hale," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Carter, CEO of Meridian Holdings. We're launching a global summit series next year. 25 events. I want you to run all of them." I raised an eyebrow. "All 25? He grinned. "If you're up for it," It's a $12 million contract. My heart skipped. Once, $800 was all I had. Now, companies were competing to hand me 8-figure deals. I'm up for it, I said, shaking his hand. That night, as I looked out over the glittering Los Angeles skyline, a thought settled over me. Not bitter or vengeful, just beautifully final. They had treated me like a maid, but I had become a mogul. They had tried to silence me. But now the world was listening, and they had tried to define my worth. But I had written my own, and this was only the beginning. 1 year later, the snow was falling softly over Manhattan, the kind of delicate storybook snowfall that used to make me feel small and forgotten. Now, it felt like a crown. The glass doors of the Aurora Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs swung open to a bustling crowd. Cameras flashed. News crews shouted my name. Rows of chairs filled with CEOs, senators, philanthropists, and young women. All here for the foundation's first annual gala. I took a deep breath before stepping onto the stage. A year ago, I was fighting to prove I was worthy. Tonight, I wasn't proving anything. I was celebrating everything I had built, not just for myself, but for every woman who had ever been told, "You can't." "Good evening," I began, my voice steady over the microphone. When I started my company, all I had was a laptop, a sketchbook, and a dream I was too scared to say out loud. And when I told my family about that dream, I paused. The crowd leaned forward, listening. They laughed. They told me to stop pretending. They told me that girls like me belonged in the kitchen, not in boardrooms. They told me I'd never succeed. A murmur swept through the room. "But here's the thing about dreams," I continued. "They don't need permission. They don't need approval. They need grit. They need courage. And they need people who believe, even when no one else does." I glanced toward the front row where Lila and James sat, smiling with pride. These were the people who had believed, my real family. "This foundation," I said, lifting a crystal plaque in my hands, "exists for every woman whose potential was dismissed, whose vision was mocked, whose voice was silenced. We see you, we believe in you, and we're going to make sure the world does too." The room erupted into applause. Thunderous, heartfelt, unstoppable. After the speeches, I walked through the crowd, shaking hands, posing for photos, listening to stories that reminded me why I'd started this journey. "Your story changed my life," one young woman told me, tears in her eyes. I quit my job and launched my own marketing firm last month. We already signed our first client. Another woman handed me a small card. I opened a bakery with the foundation's grant. We're profitable in 6 weeks. My dad told me I'd fail. Now he's my first investor. I tucked their words into my heart. This was the real win. Not the contracts, not the headlines, not the money. It was the ripple effect. The proof that my pain had become someone else's power. And then, I saw them, standing awkwardly near the back, dressed too formally, unsure if they belonged. My parents. For a moment, I considered walking away. But something inside me, older, wiser, free, told me to go to them. "Hello," I said simply. My mother looked smaller somehow. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by something almost human. "We weren't sure if we should come," she admitted. "But we wanted to see what you built." "It's beautiful," my father added, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "You're incredible." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Not for their words, but for the clarity they gave me. I no longer needed their praise. I didn't crave their approval. I was whole without it. "We made mistakes," my mother whispered. "We thought we were protecting you." "No," I said calmly. "You were protecting your comfort. I was protecting my purpose." Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, I saw regret, maybe even respect. "I hope," she said, voice trembling, "that one day you can forgive us." I held her gaze. "I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean access." She nodded slowly. And for the first time, my parents turned and walked away. Not out of control or power, but out of acceptance. And I felt free. Weeks later, I was invited to speak at Harvard Business School. The lecture hall was packed. Students scribbling notes, cameras rolling, even venture capitalists sitting in the back row. Success, I told them, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about building something so strong that no rumor, no betrayal, no sabotage can tear it down. One student raised her hand. Do you ever regret not reconciling with your family? I smiled. I did reconcile with myself. I stopped living for their version of me. And once I did that, I realized I never needed their permission to be extraordinary. The room burst into applause. By the time the following winter arrived, our company had offices in New York, Los Angeles, London, and Dubai. We'd signed over 80 million in global contracts, and the Aurora Foundation had helped launch over 120 women-led businesses. The media started calling me the architect of second chances. I liked that. It wasn't just about second chances for me. It was about giving them to others too. And one snowy December night, as I stood on the balcony of our Manhattan headquarters overlooking the city that had once felt too big for me, I realized something. This was never about revenge. It was about becoming unstoppable. I closed my eyes and thought back to that girl, the one with dish soap on her hands and dreams too fragile to say aloud. The one who believed she'd never be more than the maid in her parents' house. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her, they might underestimate you. They might try to break you, but they cannot erase what you're meant to become. I opened my eyes. The skyline glittered with possibility. This was my life now. Built from ashes, fueled by defiance, shaped by resilience. And the best part? I was just getting started.